Hello again, and thank you for staying with us. We continue here with the negative effects of high levels of rolling blackouts. South Africa, a relatively dry country, is experiencing water shortages. The shortages are as a result of water pumping machines and high-pressure valves failing to function as expected due to load shedding. There is also a problem of high water demand leading to the depletion of clean water from reservoirs. For more on this, we now speak to Mametlwe Sebei, the President of General Industries Workers Union of South Africa. Dr. Sebei, a pleasure to have you on the program this evening. Now, there is this global concern about both the quantity and the quality of water, and these same concerns also apply to a country like South Africa, which is already a water-scarce country. Firstly, as GIUSA, what is your assessment of the shortage of this much-needed resource?
It is that the situation is getting worse in Zambia. The reality is that this country, as we know, it is one of the driest in the world, but the way that we're treating our water resources leaves much to be desired, and that has to do both in terms of the contamination, the pollution of our water resources by the mining and other polluting industries, but also just even the sewage from the waste treatment facilities and infrastructure in this country, which is poorly maintained, as well as the fact that, there's a poor infrastructure investment. In fact, one report from government, I think it says that would be somewhere around, trillions in terms of money we need to be spending to maintain our infrastructure if we are to ensure that there is continuation of water supply, but also many other public infrastructure facilities, which, if not attended to urgently, would make the current nightmares of, load shedding, of water shedding, of potholes in the roads seem like a paradise by 2030.
Now, many say that only the wealthy are truly able to conserve or even find a solution without government help, which can really have a negative impact on those who most need it. What impact is the water crisis having on the poorer communities in this country?
Well, it's a state of, environmental disaster in many areas. I'm from Skukune, where every time, I visit my family there. I can tell you that only 1 out of 3 times that I make a visit, there is water supply in the village. There is, pipes and water reticulation infrastructure that has been installed, but also because of, lack of dams and also a poor maintenance of that, I think there is just no water in the pipes. But also there are still many villages where there is a lack of a basic water reticulation infrastructure like pipes and so on and so on. And I think, pipes and taps that need to be addressed. But I think what we need to do is to say, how do we make sure that we build sufficient infrastructure to harvest more water? Now, you look at the fact that, at one time we are moving from heavy amount of rainfalls, which are causing floods, when that water with a proper storm water drainage systems can be channeled into dams that need to be built, but also we can raise the heights of the existing dams to ensure that they contain more water, and at the same time as making sure that that water is properly treated, but also released and supplied to people, working class communities, particularly in both urban, but mainly in rural areas where the shortages are still extreme, and there are people in this country who are still going to rivers and, of course, to contaminated natural streams for water that are only responsible for causing so much epidemics that we've been learning about in the past few years.
When you think about it, an extreme drought could have a devastating impact on really key sectors like agriculture. Not only that, it has also proven to be very threatening to the tourism industry as well. Give us your own assessment on this.
Yes, the fact of the matter is that drought is one of the unavoidable outcomes, if you like, of climate change, which is the reason that we've got to, make sure that we deal with how our energy is supplied, we switch on to renewables, we also, take every measure possible to put a climate mitigation, climate change impact mitigation measures. And one of those measures have to be, how do we harvest more water? And I'm saying, look at the country. Very few, in fact, in some areas, as I'm talking to you now, in Port Shepstone, is it Port Shepstone in Eastern Cape? There is flood, right? There is flood at the moment. But you go to other parts of Limpopo, there is no water. Now, this in an age, we are talking 2023 year, when there is all the technology we need to ensure that we redistribute water in areas where it's overconcentrated, it's flooding, and of course, to ensure that it's supplied where it is needed. And how do you do that? You make sure that you build more dams. You make sure that there is, stormwater drainage systems. You make sure that there is infrastructure to ensure that you are able to transfer the water from dams where there is, floods and there's too much water or there's sufficient water, and through that water water reticulation system, you supply to areas that are in need. We don't have that, and for that, government has to be spending on the necessary infrastructure, and that has not been happening because of neoliberal, austerity measures and cuts on spending, particularly on capital projects, just to ensure that we expand the existing capacity. Yep. But more than that, even just to maintain the existing backlog, we are losing, billions of liters of water annually in a country which is dry, in a country where people are going without a reliable supply of water. That is criminal, that is scandalous.
And of course, just a quick correction that the area that you are referring to is indeed Port St. John's, which was our leading story this hour, looking at that flood-prone or hit area in recent times. But we turn our sights to the Western Cape, and in the city like Cape Town, there's this campaign known as the Day Zero campaign that really counted the days until the taps would be turned off, until such a time which would have a very negative impact on tourism, and officials indeed warning about this phenomena as well. It did, though, have a positive spin to it, or impact on conservation efforts in that particular city. Do you think these kind of campaigns actually work, or do we need something more drastic here?
Well, a radical change, right? As I'm saying, the problem here is that you are dealing with government that is committed to a neoliberal macroeconomic framework that means we preserve, or rather leave, a huge amount of capital that are being hoarded by big corporations, that are being hoarded by the rich, huge capital that we need to be spending on infrastructure that is required. Firstly, infrastructure to make sure that we begin to prepare this country for this kind of disasters. These disasters are not a passing storm. They are going to be a new reality. They are going to be a new normality. And how do you deal with that? The moralizing about, Day Zero, blaming ordinary people who are consuming less water, for that matter. When you are not dealing with billions of liters of water, we lose through leakages. Firstly, in the pipes, in the municipal, water reticulation infrastructure, but also in just taps at home. And things that ordinary working class people cannot do anything about. You can go and preach as much as you want. There is not going to be any change. How do you address change? You make sure that you invest in making sure that the pipes, the taps are properly maintained, but also, as I've said, we put infrastructure in this country to ensure that we are able to harvest, to retain, but also to maintain a good quality water. We are losing huge amounts of water in this country to mining industry, which could also have alternatives and be encouraged as well. And by encouraged, I don't mean moralizing with them, but putting system and regulations in place to ensure that they recycle water, they use water responsibly. But of course, lots of some of this mining that is dispensable, we also think about how do we transition away from it without, of course, compromising a need for a sustainable post-mining communities. More than that, we need to be able to say, how do we maintain our water in good quality? And that is one of the fundamental problems we are facing. Leakages of waste material into water resources is one of the biggest problems in this country, and it's not being addressed. And the working class and poor people are paying the price.
Now, we know GIUSA to be a labor organization. Why take this particular interest when it comes to water scarcity?
Well, GIUSA is not just concerned with issues of workers' workplace. We are a movement of the working class. The reality is that the people who bear the burden of water shortages, of water scarcity, but also contamination, it's not people in suburbs. It's not people who are staying, as you said, in rich affluent areas where people are able to clean their water, people who are able to buy bottled water. We are representing workers whose families, whose lives are spent in townships, in rural areas where there is either water shortages or if a water supply is contaminated. These are people who get sick. These are people who watch their children die of preventable illnesses and epidemics that break out all the time. I mean, not so long ago, there was an outbreak of cholera, I think in part of Mpumalanga and so on. These are places where workers are living. This is a reality for the workers, and we cannot be indifferent to the plight of our members because we are just not concerned about them coming to work and making profit for the rich the way that the capitalists are. For us, these are real lives, these are real humans whose lives have been devastated by a criminal abdication of responsibility by the state and by this government to ensure a quality water supply for everyone.
That was GISA President Mametlwe Sebei.